Howdy Doomtown fans, and welcome to my review of Bad Medicine. This is the latest Saddlebag expansion for Doomtown Reloaded, and as is the custom, we're going to be looking at the dudes in part 1 of the video. We'll look at all of the rest of the cards in part 2 of the video. We're going to begin with a new dude for the bandits. This is Sophie Lacoste. She's a jack of spades, she's 0 draw, 2 influence, 4 to play with 1 upkeep. She has repeat noon, pay 1 ghost rock. If Sophie is in a public location, one of your other dudes at this location gets +1 influence. If you're looking for a way to generate a ton of influence within the bandits, this seems like a pretty good way to do it. 2 influence for 4 cost, 1 upkeep. I think that's pretty standard. We can definitely do that with some other dudes, but that's not too bad. And then you're also going to have this repeat noon thing that's going to give you a way to potentially get a lot of influence. The ability is kind of limited, especially since you can only use it at the location. So that really makes me think that if you start her and you want to use this to buy a lot of time, you're going to want to control the town square. I think that's probably more well-suited for the Worldly Desires build, but I could also see just playing her in your deck as a 4-cost way to get 2 influence, and really the only thing that's going to interfere with is the Kung Fu, since she's a high pull. The next dude is for the Eagle Wardens. This is Crazy Mike Drascalo. He's a 5 of spades, he's 3 draw, he's 1 influence, he's 5 to play with 1 upkeep. When Mike calls out a dude with lower influence, the Mark's controller must discard a card as an additional cost to refuse the call out. I really like these Eagle Wardens cards that have been messing around with call out type effects. I think Danny Wild has been really interesting as a dude that's you can't call out, you can pump up his influence. Now this thing, I don't know how much I really like this trait. It seems to me like it's going to be really hard to use. You're going to probably need to have his influence higher if you're realistically going to do a lot of damage with this thing. You're only going to be able to call out 0 influence dudes, and I don't know how often the Eagle Wardens are in positions where they're calling out dudes and the opponent is refusing the call out. I think really only the Danny Wild deck, the Dead Man's Thing, does that, and that's after they've set up and everything. I don't really see you wanting to play this guy in that deck. He's got some okay stats. I think maybe in the future this guy could make a little bit more sense in a more aggressive Eagle Warden style. But for now, I don't really see this fitting into either one of the major archetypes that I see, which are the Spirit Fortress and the Dead Man's Thing. Next up, we have a dude for the 4th ring. This is Horace Manse. He's an 8 of spades, 3 draws, 0 influence. He's 1 to play with 2 upkeep. He's transient. He has react. After Horace enters play, take an abomination from your boot hill into your play hand and discard a card. I'm really liking these transient dudes, and I also really like these low-cost guys that are supposed to be in your deck for later on. Here's another bomb guy that's going to just be easy to use in those abomination decks. The first card I thought of was Funtime Freddy. Really early in the game, like before it begins, Funtime Freddy aces himself, so you'll at least have a target in the form of him, but later in the game this gets even more powerful as you have different dudes to select. Now the one thing that I do think is kind of a problem with this thing is that it's on value with several other cards that you might want to play. Obviously Stephen Wiles, but also something like the Wretched. It's on value with these, so I think that maybe has it sort of run into a little bit of a problem, but at the same time that also makes it easier to play Horace than it would be otherwise, since he's on value with 8s, and 8s are just the best value in the game. I definitely think this is going to be worth it as like a 1 or maybe 2 of, maybe even more, in like an Oddities of Nature or maybe Sanatorium style. I think this really has some potential to get back those cheap abominations that you want to just play every single turn. Especially something like Bobo, this could be really strong. Next up is another 4th ring dude, and this is one that we've seen before. This is Gia Main, Experience 1. He's still a Queen of Spades, he's 3 draw, 2 influence, 7 to play with 1 upkeep. He's Experience 1, he's Huckster 1. He has Noon, play a condition Noon action, reducing its cost by 2 to make Gia a stud. And then he has Noon, boot a spell on him, and pay a Ghost Rock to take a condition from your discard pile into your hand. We've seen this condition stuff building over the last few releases, and here I think is really the first card that makes me heavily consider playing a deck like that. The ability to recur those conditions is going to be insane. A lot of the conditions attach to dudes or deeds, and they do negative stuff like making it harder to keep them around or just kill them over time, make them weaker, stuff like that. And having an ability to get those back after they've expired, after your opponent has let the dude die or something like that, is going to be so strong. Not to mention you're going to be able to reduce the cost when you play them. A lot of them do have costs. And if you watch some of my reviews of the condition cards, a lot of times my major complaint was the cost. So I think that this is really an enabler for that style. I think you're definitely going to start this dude. I'm thinking probably Sanatorium, mainly because it's going to be easier to use Forced Quarantine, which I think is one of the better cards of that sort. And this is just a pretty solid dude for that. You're still going to have access to Huckster if you want to play, P-Mark or just something within that. So, man, this is good. I really like this card. I'm not sure how strong that deck's going to be because it's so emerging, but I think this is really the cornerstone for that new archetype. Next up, we have a new dude for the Law Dogs. This is Janosch Prat. He's a 3 of spades, 1 draw, 0 influence. He's 3 to play with no upkeep. He's a deputy, and he's Mad Scientist 1. Shootout boot, choose a gadget weapon in your discard pile. He invents the card without booting, reducing its cost by 2. If successful, attach it to any of your dudes in the shootout, discarded at the end of the turn. I'm mixed of opinion on this guy. On one hand, I like to see new, cheap Law Dogs. I think that a lot of factions could use cheap dudes just to contest for the starting posses. And this guy at 3 costs, no upkeep, is definitely an option there. But I think he's really got a lot of bad things going for him. First of all, his stats really suck. He's low value, he's low bullets, and he has no influence, which is really, really huge. I think Law Dogs already have plenty of problems starting enough influence, and at 3 costs, you're going to eat up something that you could be spending on like a Phillip or something like that to get a little more influence. Now, my other main thing is that this guy is only going to let you interact with weapon gadgets, and while there are a few of them, I don't know how much you're really going to want to just use it that one time. I mean, maybe if you built your deck in the right way with like an Acid Coil gun or something like that, it could be okay. But it seems to me like that's a massive limitation, and it's so hard to play something like Flamethrower or something like that reasonably. I don't really see you wanting to be able to do this. I think this is definitely a card that we need to see more gadget weapons for this to even be something you're considering, because you're sacrificing that influence and just like stats on a dude in order to get this ability. And if you don't have a really awesome use for that ability, I think this is really weak. The next dude is also for the Law Dogs. This is Vasilis the Boar. He's an 8 of spades. He's 3 stud, 1 influence, 4 to play, and 2 upkeep. He's a deputy. While Vasilis is in a shootout, each wanted dude in the opposing posse has -2 value. Then he has shootout. Use this shootout ability of a weapon on him, ignoring the boot cost, and then ace the weapon. Get your shotguns back out if you put them away. This is a sweet addition to the Law Dogs card pool. It's going to make it a lot easier to consider playing shotguns again. Now, this guy, obviously the value thing is going to interact best with effects that are value driven, so shotgun, maybe Acid Coil gun, an option there. You're also going to be able to use the ability a second time, which means you're going to get to shoot another dude with the gun. Now, there's definitely situations where they're not going to have 2 shotgunnable dudes, but I think if you play your cards right, you can set it up where you pump this guy's bullets sky high and then try to get into fights. This is a really sweet addition to the card pool. I think that this is probably going to see play. I would consider starting this dude if you're really going to do a heavy gun focus thing. But otherwise, I think this guy's probably a decent addition, even at 8 of spades, because he's just an affordable dude at that card slot. And the other dudes that we have in faction there are really expensive. So I think this is probably going to see play just for that reason, if nothing else. I think there's a lot of potential for this guy, and I'm really hoping that Shotgun Law Dogs becomes a thing again. The next dude is for Morgan Cattle Co. This is Luke the Errand Boy. He's a 2 of spades, 2 draw, 0 influence. He's 1 to play with no upkeep. He has noon or shootout. Move a gadget from your dude in this or an adjacent location to another of your dudes in this or an adjacent location. The gadget decks have been getting lots of goodies lately, and this is no exception. I absolutely love this guy. I really think that this is what I like to see in low-end dudes. This is a really cheap addition to your starting posse that's going to be a couple of bullets, and he's got this really awesome ability that's going to help you in pretty much every single game. Basically, one of the things that the gadget decks have issues with is that after you invent the gadget, you have to use more actions to move it to the right guy. Sometimes that takes a couple of actions to do, and just generally, it's very action intensive in order for you to be able to get all of your gear deployed where it needs to be. Here's going to be an easy guy that is going to let you move some stuff around, especially mid-shootout, so you can have one big gadget that defends a certain guy, and then if a different dude gets into a shootout, as long as they're connected by Luke, you're going to be able to move that gadget over to the other guy. So this is going to be a way to defend multiple guys with the same gadget. It's going to be a way to get your gadgets deployed where they need to go, and it's all in the form of a 1-cost, no upkeep dude that has bullets. I really love this guy. I think this is an absolute must start in the gadget decks, and this is just a great addition to that emerging archetype that I think, if it hasn't arrived already, really should soon, because they've been getting so many awesome cards lately. The next dude is also for Morgan Cattle Co. This is Arnold Stewart. He's a 3 of spades, he's 0 draw, 1 influence, he's 4 to play and no upkeep. He's Mad Scientist 1, he has noon, boot a gadget on Arnold to discard the top 5 cards of your deck. If one of those cards was an out-of-town deed, you may boot Arnold to place the deed into your hand. I was pretty skeptical of this guy when I first read him, but when I actually looked at the list of out-of-town deeds, it occurred to me that this guy might be pretty good in the right build. I think Clubless Gadgets is probably the guy that can use this the best. The big thing is, there are certain out-of-town deeds, like the R&D Ranch and Lula's Exploit, that work exceptionally well with the gadget-oriented decks, and this is a guy that can help you find those early, make sure you don't have to play a ton of copies of them, and I think is just generally an okay guy as a starting dude. He's going to be no upkeep, which is huge. He's still worth an influence, and Mad Scientist 1 is going to be good enough, I think, for quite a few setups. So I really think that this guy could see some play just to locate the R&D Ranch and Lula's Exploit early. Not to mention we still have Pat's Perch, which is just a decent way to make some money. Same thing with Jackson's Strike. And Blake Ranch, I could see that being okay as long as you can still make your pulls. Next up, we have a dude for the Sloan Gang. This is Rick Henderson. He's a Jack of Spades. He's 3 draw, 1 influence. He's 4 to play with 1 upkeep. He has React Boot. After a dude goes home booted from this shootout, their owner must give you a Ghost Rock or discard them. This guy's not blowing me away, but I think he could probably be okay. Now, it's worth pointing out that you can't use this if they refuse a call out, right? Because that's not going to be from the shootout. The shootout is initiated when they accept the call out. That does mean, though, if you make them fight a round of a shootout and then they want to chicken out and run home after the round, you're going to be able to use this to potentially discard the guy if they don't have any Ghost Rock. Or you could just use this to get a Ghost Rock in situations where they're running home after fights. I don't know, this is okay. I think that the ability is maybe not that great, but this is still a guy with okay stats. He's got a high value 3 bullets for 4 cost, so I could see this maybe seeing play as like a 1 or 2 of. The last dude is a neutral dude. Her name is Willa McGowan. She's a 6 of spades, 1 draw, 0 influence. She's 1 to play and no upkeep. She has resolution, Ace Willa, to send all other dudes in your posse home booted. One of the cards that I've whined about a whole bunch is the Brute, just because I think 4th Ring has access to this sort of panic button that gets them away from terrible shootouts in the form of the Brute. Now here's not quite the same thing, but it's also a panic button card that you can use to get away from a bad shootout, and it's going to be available to all of the factions, not just 4th Ring. Now that said, you can start both her and the Brute in 4th Ring, which I'm definitely going to do. But I think that she's going to be a really solid addition to setup intensive, slower decks that need some way to panic button escape from horrible shootouts early in the game. Now these aren't going to save you from jobs, at least most of them, but it is going to save you from just decks that are trying to get in dumb shootouts that you're going to have trouble dealing with early in the game. This is just a great addition. I feel like a neutral card like this has needed to exist for a long time, and this is going to give me a reason to stop whining about the Brute. That's going to do it for part 1 of my Bad Medicine review. Be sure to tune into part 2 where we're going to talk about all of the rest of the cards in the pack, all the non-dudes. Got a lot of cool things to look at over there. And if you like this video, be sure to subscribe and click the button that looks like a thumbs up. I'll see you over in part 2.